Well, it's all right. Riding around in the breeze. Well, it's all right. If you live the life you please. Well, it's all right. Doing the best you can. Well, it's all right. As long as you lend a hand.
I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco. And today I am joined by a guest that really intrigues me because he's the son of a former Major League Baseball player and the nephew of a former League Baseball umpire. And his name is Tim Haller. The people I mentioned before were the late Tom Haller, his dad, and Bill Haller, Major League umpire. Tim, nice to have you with me on these airways, comfortably zoned.
Hey, thank you for having me. This is going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. For me, it's terrific because a little background. I was telling Tim off the air, I was a New York Giant fan when I was a kid growing up. And in 1962, the San Francisco Giants won the National League pennant, and the New York Mets were formed. And I had been an 11-year-old kid, loses his team 5 or 6 years later, still following the Giants, a Giant apologist out in San Francisco all these years. And the Mets come in, and I decide, well, Mets are my babies. Giants left me, I'm going to be a Mets fan. Sure enough, the Giants picked that year to win the pennant, and they came back to Shea. It wasn't Shea at that time, the Polo Grounds, number of times, and I rooted for the Mets, but I loved the Giants. I loved Willie Mays, and the 62 season was very special for me as a kid because when it came down to it, I rooted for the Mets, but they weren't going anywhere. So the Giants, I loved it that the Giants won, and I thought it was great. I felt a little let down that it happened across the country. And when we talked off air, you had a thought that you appreciated what it must have been like for we Giant fans and my friends who are Dodger fans to lose their teams. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, baseball is such a huge fabric. It's such a huge thing in our lives. The teams that we identify with and the players that we endear. I couldn't even fathom what it was like for the New Yorkers and the locals out there to lose those teams. And
right.
It's just, to me, it's a little mind-boggling at times. And then where does your loyalty lie? Where does it go after that? And I think you exemplify that by your story. And here's this expansion club, the Mets, trying to get established in the National League. And those were some lean years, but with great character too. I mean, and today we get to experience the Mets playing, some really good baseball. And
absolutely.
And what a thrill for the city of New York.
What a thrill for all those Met fans like myself who over the years have had the ups and downs, the roller coaster ride of it all. And putting it together this year was kind of cool. But I want to tell you something cool. So I'm a Met fan, and I love the number 5 for some reason. I worship Joe DiMaggio, and 5 was my favorite number. The Mets' original catcher was Hobie Landreth. As Casey said, he was the number 1 draft choice in the expansion draft. If you don't have a catcher, there's going to be a lot of pass balls. He wore number 5, and I'm a number freak, and your dad wore number 5 for the San Francisco Giants as a catcher on that 1962 team. And your dad, Tom Haller, was kind of split the job. It was really weird. I'm sure you know the history of it. The two catchers they had were Ed Bailey, a solid hitting catcher, and your dad, who was younger, and they were both left-handed hitters, and they kind of had a platoon system. Can you tell me what it was based on? And can you tell me they each played about half the games, and what was Alvin Dark, the manager's decision like as to who to play? And did your dad ever talk about that? Was that just off the top of my head?
Yeah, from my memory, Dad.
I know you were a kid.
Right. I mean, I was born in '63, but over the years, Dad would share with me his philosophies, etc. And from what I recall, Dad telling me, because my dad was young, he he had the tutelage of Bailey, obviously, and the leadership of Alvin Dark. Dad could hit left-handed pitching a little bit better than Ed. Point given the home run off of Whitey Ford in the '62 series. But it gave Dad an opportunity to kind of get acclimated with National League pitching. And I think that Alvin Dark was able to pull it off, two left-handed hitting catchers, but also to have Bailey's tutelage and kind of groom my dad into becoming a pretty good catcher,
I'll say, 8-9 years in the big leagues. And another irony is he was a real good catcher with the Giants and a real good catcher with the Dodgers. There's a lot of times that they've made deals with each other, and for one reason or another, they've all been interesting to me. He came over to the Dodgers. I think was it for Thomas? Daryl Thomas, was that the trade for you?
No, Dad was traded in '68, in February of '68, for Ron Hunt and Nate Oliver.
Okay.
And it's the only deal consummated between the two organizations. Now there have been guys that have played for both teams, but it was the only actual trade consummated between the two clubs, and that's still kind of a historical thing. Obviously guys will sign as free agents or get picked up later, off waivers or whatever. But so that was kind of an interesting thing. I remember coming home in kindergarten in 1968 to a horde of reporters and photographers outside our front door, and kind of crawling and etching my way through into the front hallway and going to the staircase where my mom and brother were. And I'm curious to know what's going on. Of course, every move my father made, he was my hero.
Newspaper, right? Yeah.
And I'm wondering what's going on. So Mom whispers in my ear, "Well, honey, your dad's been traded." And my eyes just widened, and already the heartache started. But when she said he's been traded to the Dodgers, my reaction was, and very loud, "You mean he's going to be playing for the bad guys?" And that's something that we still laugh about to this day. So, it was an interesting thing. And Dad's 12 years in the major leagues, and talking
12
to...
years, not 8 years. Wow.
Yeah, 12 years. He was with the Giants for 8, and then, a little less than 8 full seasons, and then the Dodgers for 4, and he finished up in '72 with Detroit. So.
Right. What do you remember that? Were you old enough to remember the Detroit experience?
I do. The thing I remember the most about Tiger Stadium back in those days was they had the best Polish sausages in the world. but the stadium was obviously just historic, and there was something special about that organization as well. And in '72 in division play, they got beat by Oakland in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
I have great memories of the summer spent in Bloomfield Hills, where we lived, and going to the ballpark in Detroit.
Wow, that's very interesting. And you got to probably meet Ernie Harwell at that time.
Well, I did get to meet him, but of course at that age and at 9 years old, I couldn't really, I didn't appreciate it, and I even look back at my life in those years that I was just so young, and I took a lot of it for granted. The fact that my dad played baseball, I just thought everybody's dad played baseball, and life was
not only, Tim, did not everybody's dad play baseball, but not every baseball player was anything like your dad. And I'm going to say two things as an example. First of all, he gave back scholarship money to the University of Illinois after '62, after they won. I thought, I think it was that year, but he gave back money that he literally earned to get his education, yes, but to show the school. That was something you didn't read about. I read about that in the Sporting News, and it's impressed me all those years. That's one thing. Second thing, your uncle, a major league umpire, umpired in a game that your dad was in. At least one game. Right? Am I right?
That is correct. And only one game, because, again, that was in '72. My uncle was an American League umpire. And the Tigers were in Kansas City. And Dad was behind the plate, and Uncle Bill was working that game behind the plate. And the Tigers got...
that tells me something... That tells me something about your dad's integrity, and of course your uncle's integrity. Something like that is indicative. I mean, no one really complained about it. It was mentioned, of course, but nobody thought for a second that Bill Howell would call your dad out on a ball that wasn't a strike, or vice versa. You know what I'm saying? It tells me a lot. And if you look at the game and how it's deteriorated in so many moralistic ways over the years, there was a throwback, and that's why I love interviewing you. Just to get a touch of that. It's really terrific. Thanks, Tim, for being here.
I appreciate it, and I recall that the whole '72 thing, the only real backlash that came from it was Earl Weaver and his quipping and bemoaning about that particular game and how that was going to, favor the Tigers. And, of course, in the Eastern Division, the Orioles and the Tigers, it came down to that last weekend of the season. Weaver filed a complaint with the American League office. But I asked my dad later, many years, I said, how was Uncle Bill? He goes, he was probably the best umpire in the American League. He called a great game, and there was no partiality, and they never even had that when they were growing up. They were there for the integrity of the game, and
right.
And
what was your grandfather like? What was passed down to them from your grandfather, and was he into baseball? There was any recollection of that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. My grandfather, Frank, we called him Red. He was a red-headed Croatian kid, first generation in Joliet, Illinois, Lockport, actually, which is just outside of Joliet. He really taught his two sons, he taught them the value of hard work, the work ethic, and the value of your word being the best component of your personal being. He was a bit of a character, you know. He loved the game of baseball growing up. He told me a story one time that he asked his dad for a glove when he was a late teen, and he brought him home a pair of work gloves, thinking he was going to get a brand new baseball gloves. My great grandpa Haller brought him a pair of work gloves. So, you know, hard work and the work ethic, et cetera. But, you know, Grandpa instilled in his sons and I think his grandkids the value of integrity, you know, hard work, being a person of your word, following through. And those things are, you know, still a big part of the fabric of our family.
Beautiful. What do you do with your life, Tim?
Well, I played for a few years with the Baltimore Orioles and Chicago White Sox organizations back in the 80s.
Right. And
then I got involved in a manufacturing company in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We made metal roof products in metal roof systems. Was fortunate enough to sell that company in 2004, just prior to my dad's passing in November of 2004. And then I had, you know, there was a life change for me with Dad's illness and death. I've battled addiction for years, alcoholism specifically. I love to drink bourbon and a lot of it. And it got the better of me, and today I'm very involved in my recovery, but I work as a drug and alcohol counselor at a facility down here in the desert of Southern California, and I'm also an ordained minister, and I work a lot with people in recovery. That's really what I do.
I'm just curious because go ahead.
No, go ahead after you.
Oh, I was just going to ask you because I'm very, what they call in California, I don't know if it's all over, I'm a 420 activist. I'm very pro marijuana, both for recreational use and certainly for medical purposes. Do you consider that to be a drug and part of your recovery program, or do most drug recovery programs include marijuana, exclude it, or now seeing that it's not a drug, it's not a gateway, it's an herb, and this, that, and the other thing? How does the drug community look at marijuana per se? I just want an objective.
Well, as far as the community is concerned, I think they're pretty conservative. I think that they all feel that there is certain aspects to the drug that can lead to other things. Personally, I am an advocate of marijuana, and from a recreational use and a medicinal use. Now, I'm a little different in that regard, but I do know that people that
is that because do you suppose that's because you're a thinker? No, never.
I would like to think that I'm more of a philosopher than I am a psychologist. Absolutely, I try to operate more on philosophy than I do psychology. But the truth of the matter is, marijuana is something that is vital in so many different ways to our society, as it is to an oppositional pose. And it really just, my answer to that is it's up to the individual. If the individual is able to maintain and do certain things and be responsible and carry on with their lives, and there are no dramatic consequences because of that behavior, by all means, use it. If it's enhancing their life from a spiritual aspect, or if it's enhancing their life because they're suffering from a grave disease or a disorder that they have, I advocate it, absolutely. Now,
and
if
grave grave could be just life itself, just getting by in life could be a grave issue and a grave disease, as it were. So if you needed just to, in California, I'm a medical patient because of my floating anxiety. They consider that reason enough to cardinals.
And I think that I'm all for it. Do it. I think
Yes.
it's far more beneficial to smoke a little pot or to eat a brownie laced with marijuana than it is to take a pharmaceutical drug to curb the anxiety, whatever form of anxiety you may have. I'm not a big advocate of medicating in terms of the chemical side of things as far as pharmaceuticals, et cetera. I think that we've seen a lot of down or bad things because of that as well. But again, it's, personal opinion, and I believe that there is a place for marijuana in our society, and I think that we've gotten a little bit too psychological regarding the benefits of marijuana, and we have to realize that it is something that can, certainly enhance someone's life.
And to say nothing of the advances they're making in terms of reducing tumors and helping with glaucoma and reducing blood pressure. And
the list goes on and on, right?
Absolutely. And the states that are denying it are just backward and out of touch. And I think California will become all legal for both recreation and medical. It's been medical for about 10 years now. And some of the other states around here, Colorado and Washington and Oregon now is legal. So within 5 years, I think it will be legal throughout the country. But what most concerns me as someone who has been a wake and baker for many, many years is that it's not decriminalized. You don't have to legalize it. You could just simply decriminalize it. The reason they legalize it is so that the states can derive the tax money that comes from it. And they still have people in jail, many of them do, for offenses around marijuana. I think it's hypocritical from that standpoint that the state is benefiting, but sometimes you got to break some eggs, and in the long term, we're at least putting the word out there. And I appreciate you helping me do that because this was unexpected. We did not talk about this, and I was just trying to get your reaction and trying to get your, as another fellow communicative human being, to a changing world. Did drugs play much of a part in you dare talk about any of that when steroids were going on? Did he talk about anything that changed consciousnesses of people? I know Willie was reputed to have what they call red juice, a little upper medication and thing that he'd drink in the hot summer dog days of summer. You did ever mention what was going on?
He told me a little bit about what they would take in terms. My dad, I don't believe, participated in that, and if he did, he never told me. But greenies were a big thing back then, I guess in the 60s and 70s.
60s and 70s, too. I didn't know that. I thought that was later in the 80s, but yeah.
And then later on, when I played, cocaine was pretty prevalent from an amphetamine use or, that sort of upper effect. Right. But I also played in an era where guys were beginning the whole steroid, HGH, enhancement drug kind of culture. And
now, what leagues did you play in the minors?
I played in the Florida State League. I played in the Midwest League. I played in the Southern League. Okay. So, and there were guys that eventually got to the major leagues that they, when I was rooming with them or playing with them, they were taking pill forms of different types of drugs. For whatever reason, I recoiled to that. I always had this sense of purity with the game. I didn't want to cheat myself or the game. But these guys had some ability, and they knew they were going to have an opportunity to play at that level. And I think they wanted to do whatever they could because that was really the beginning, the advent of these huge salaries. And, some of the guys that I played with, they got involved. I was an infielder. I played second base mainly. I did a little bit of third and short, but I was a utility guy, switch hitter with pretty good speed. And unfortunately, my thing ended with a pitch to the left orbital and shattered the left side of my face, and my vision was permanently damaged in my left eye. So it was pretty tragic, actually. I felt I was sort of on my way, and unfortunately.
I'm so sorry to hear about your injury. Your playing career notwithstanding, just the trauma of being hit, and my condolences about that. That sucks.
Yeah. It was a long time ago now. I hope I've been able to get through the emotional side of it. That there are times when I reminisce and I think about what if or that kind of thing, but it just wasn't meant to be. I think that for whatever reason, the Howlers, we live a life that's pretty transparent. It's pretty out there. We don't, but we still try to stay below the radar. And, I joke a little bit. Dad passed away from West Nile virus, which was a tragic and unfortunate thing in 2004, ultimately succumbing to meningitis and encephalitis. And my brother, in June of 2012, I think it was, he had a bacterial infection which has rendered him paraplegic. My injury, that kind of thing. I sat at the dinner table one night and looked across at my mother and said, "Hey, are we related to the Kennedys?" But I think that we had a little bit more higher esteem than unfortunately the Kennedys. But I don't know.
I think about Joseph Kennedy, the ambassador to England, when they were sending back ships to his friend Hitler, sending ships back, refugees, and he was smuggling booze in, and what a piece of crap he was, and how the acorn rarely falls far from the tree. And in your case, it didn't fall far from the tree, and that's well appreciated, not from your money or your athletic fame or any of that stuff. You guys have integrity, and you can't buy that. You can't live without it. You can't live with yourself if you don't have it. And pretty cool, Tim Haller.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty blessed. For the most part, my life has been pretty full. I had an opportunity to meet and to know a lot of great people. And to this day, I still have some great friendships through baseball, and not even involved in baseball. And I just, life is a gift. I look at it as something that, we have an opportunity to do some good stuff while we're around, and hopefully touch people that come across our paths to encourage them to want to try to do the right thing.
Yeah. Are you raising children of your own?
I have one daughter who will be 29 in November, and she lives in Madison, Wisconsin with her husband and 3-year-old daughter. We aren't that close. That was a sort of a baseball romance, but she's a very well-adjusted, responsible lady, and she has a fine husband and a beautiful daughter. So there are no kids in my life today.
Okay. Well, does she understand where her roots?
She absolutely does, and
good.
And I'm grateful for that.
Beautiful. Hey, I'm grateful you came on the show. You're terrific.
Hey, thanks for having me. I enjoyed this.
Good. I'm glad. I hope the whole idea is to have fun, and get something out of it and pass stuff on. And I hope it was cathartic for you. I hope you had good memories come up about your dad. And it was a trip for me because those were terrific days. You mentioned Alvin Dark. He was the shortstop on my New York Giants boyhood team when I was a kid. And he managed that team. Pitching coach, I think it was Jansen was the pitching coach, and Whitey Lockman were coaches on that team. So you brought up a lot of nice memories for me, and I didn't even ask you about Willie McCovey. I think that the franchise glows because of Willie McCovey, and I'm wondering if your dad mentioned anything about him or their relationship and what it was like on a team that was fairly segregated. You had a lot of Latins, a lot of white guys, and a lot of black guys. What was McCovey about, according to your dad?
Well, according to my father, I think my dad had the greatest, utmost respect for Stretch.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
He and back in those days, those guys were family, and to this day, we still are. I mean, and what a great thing it was for me to grow up in such a diverse clubhouse. I mean, and the admiration and love between these guys was immeasurable. So that was a great experience for me to see how people can get along regardless of color of skin. But what it taught me, and it was just the fact that there were men that were playing a game that they loved, but they had each other's back at all time. My dad's love for Willie McCovey, it can't really be expressed in words. They came up together through the Giants minor league system, and they got pretty well acquainted when they were in the minor leagues, but to have spent those years together with the big club. And Willie was kind of a quiet guy. He let his talking happen out between the white lines. But he was just Dad just loved him, and they were closest and dearest of friends.
Nice. That I have memories of that just coincide with that harmony around Willie. I mean, everybody loved Willie McCovey, just pure and simple. And everybody loved your dad, and I just want to mention, too, that your dad was a Big Ten quarterback at Illinois. Am I correct?
That is correct. He also played basketball and baseball. He lettered 9 times in the 3 years he was eligible to play those sports. But when he signed with the Giants, then that negated his amateur status. So he was the last guy to be able to letter 9 times in 3 years for the Fighting Illini. So I think that's pretty impressive.
You're damn right, and those were the days when there were crossovers into different seasons. So it took something. If you're going to play baseball, you've got to give up something to play basketball as well, and it went right down the line. If you're playing basketball, you can't put all your skills and all your devotion into football. So to letter in all 3 sports and to really be a damn good quarterback is something. You got to be proud, Tim, and I know you are, and it comes through. So I hope from time to time you'll come back and that we can reacquaint. And this was a real pleasure for me.
It was as for me as well, and I want to thank you, and just it was awesome that we could go down memory lane a little bit and talk about Dad and his accomplishments as well as the great guys that he played with as well.
Terrific.
Thank you.
We'll come back. I got hundreds of we could go on all day about life itself, and you're a cool guy, Tim, and I'm really happy to have met you. I'm going to end the episode by imploring you and everybody out there to keep your dreams wet and your humor dry. Keep your kids out of military recruiting stations, and that includes your grandchildren as well, and off the laps of clerics that wear dresses just to be on the safe side, all of it. And keep on keeping on, and thanks again, my friend.
Take good care, Frank. Good talking to you.
All right. Talk soon.
Bye now.